Hello, my name is Stephen Hans. I'm a funeral director at the Hans Funeral Home in Albany, New York. One of the questions that I'm asked most frequently is, how much does a funeral cost? After years of trying to answer this question, I've actually come to the conclusion that the question people should be asking is, how do I compare funeral costs? I put together this presentation in the hopes that you will become a more educated consumer when it comes to choosing funeral services.
Before we begin, I just want to highlight the two biggest mistakes families make when choosing a funeral service. Those mistakes are paying for hidden charges and comparing funeral costs by only comparing service charges. Please stay with me for a few minutes and you will understand exactly what I mean, and you will be a more educated consumer. For virtually every funeral service, the total funeral costs consist of charges that are organized into three categories. The categories are service charges, merchandise, and cash advances. In order to illustrate these categories, let's use the example of the most commonly chosen funeral service. Such a service consists of calling hours at the funeral home with an open casket so that people can view the deceased. Viewing is followed the next day by either a religious or memorial service, which is then followed by burial or cremation. For such a service, the costs in each of the three categories will be as follows. First, service charges last year in the Capital District varied from about $2,600 to $5,800. They include transportation of the deceased both to the funeral home and later to either the cemetery or the crematory, the preparation of the deceased, which, if the deceased is being viewed, usually requires embalming. Embalming is not required by law, but is normally needed to have a viewing. Also included are the services of the funeral director and staff to make all arrangements for the services, complete legal and other paperwork, supervise the calling hours and service, and the use of the funeral home facilities. Second, merchandise includes the casket you choose, the burial vault, also known as an outer interment receptacle, the urn vault, and memorial items such as DVD presentations, memorial or prayer cards, and a guest book. In some cases, obituaries will be listed here also. Note that most cemeteries require the use of a burial vault when a casket is buried, but most cemeteries do not require the use of an urn vault when an urn is buried. Families choosing burial will need to choose a casket and a burial vault, whereas families choosing cremation will need to choose a cremation casket and an urn. Third, cash advances are simply amounts paid to other parties at the time of the funeral. Sometimes funeral homes will pay these expenses as a convenience to the family. If an expense is listed on a funeral home itemization as a cash advance, then by law you may only be charged exactly what the funeral home paid for that item. Cash advances typically include cemetery or crematory charges, certified copies of the death certificate, offerings for clergy, musician fees, and in some cases obituary charges. Here we come to the first caution. Don't pay any hidden charges. You must learn that some funeral homes add charges in by marking up obituaries, by charging for services such as obtaining a burial flag or other veterans' benefits, or for arranging flowers and filing life insurance claims. I've even heard of funeral homes charging a fee for helping file life insurance claims of up to 10% of the value of the policy. Our funeral home does not apply any hidden charges. We view these services as part of our job. And now here's the second caution. Don't make the biggest single mistake when comparing funeral costs. Don't compare funeral costs by only comparing service charges. This mistake can cost families hundreds, even thousands of dollars. Let's look at an example. The example I'm going to show you is derived from actual documentation from other funeral homes that I have personally reviewed. Here we compare costs at Hans Funeral Home with another funeral home that advertises very low service charges. You may actually have seen advertising that states that you can choose a complete funeral for only $2,600. Well, that's really not the complete story. That $2,600 only refers to the first line in this chart. And no matter what funeral home you choose, you have to choose all the items in this chart before you find your actual total. When you look at the top line on the chart, your immediate reaction is, wow, I can save over $2,000 by choosing the other funeral home. But watch what happens when we fill this chart out. Information we have gathered from the various families we have served has shown us that funeral homes with low service charges typically have very high casket prices. And so you see that this fact alone uses up much of the savings. But wait, as we add charges in for the burial vault, memorial items, the obituary, and flower arranging, then move on to complete the chart, the savings have more than disappeared. If an obituary is listed under funeral home charges, then you are paying a marked up fee for the obituary. Only if the obituary is listed under cash advances are you paying for the obituary at cost. As you can see, the $2,000 savings from the first line, service charges, is now gone. In fact, the funeral home with the low service charges actually ends up costing a lot more. In summary, don't compare funeral costs based on service charges only. Get a written estimate and find out if obituaries are a cash advance item. Ask if there are likely to be any charges not shown on the estimate.
I hope this information has helped you to better understand funeral costs and made you a more educated consumer. Please call or email us with any questions you may have or to set up an appointment. Thank you for your time today.